They found her 3 days after the boy died, kneeling in the mud outside the estate gates, her nursing bag already torn apart by the mob. Elena Ward had saved 17 lives in 2 years on the Colorado frontier, but nobody remembered that. They only remembered the one she couldn't save, the one whose mother had money and a voice loud enough to drown out the truth. By the time the sheriff cleared her name, the damage was done. No family would let her through their door. No store would sell her food. The town had already decided she was guilty, and guilt didn't deserve to live. Now, alone in a rotting cabin with nothing left but 4 walls and the approaching winter, Elena faced a question she'd stopped asking weeks ago. What do you do when the world throws you away? The answer came on a frozen November morning, delivered in blood and snow, a dying man at her door, and a choice that would decide if either of them saw spring. If you want to know what she did next, follow my story to the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The cabin smelled like rot and old smoke. Elena sat on the floor with her back against the wall, staring at the last piece of dried venison in her hand. It was small, barely 2 bites if she was generous with herself, which she hadn't been in weeks. Her ribs showed through the thin fabric of her dress. Her hands shook even when she wasn't cold, though she was cold most of the time now. She turned the meat over slowly, studying it like it might offer some kind of answer. Eat it now and have strength for today. Save it, and maybe last another day. Either way, the math didn't work. Winter was coming hard, and she had nothing. The wind rattled the cabin's warped door. She could see daylight through the gaps in the wood. Snow had started 2 days ago, light flurries that didn't stick, but enough to remind her what was coming. She'd tried to patch the walls with mud and grass, but her hands were too weak, and the mud wouldn't hold. Water dripped through the roof in 3 places. She'd positioned her only pot to catch the worst of it, but the steady plink, plink, plink just reminded her she was alone. She bit into the venison, chewed slowly. It was tough and salty and gone too fast. That was it, the last of her food. Elena closed her eyes and let her head fall back against the wall. The wood was rough, uneven. She could feel every ridge through her hair. Her mother used to say hunger made people do terrible things, desperate things. Elena hadn't believed her. She'd been young then, still living in Philadelphia, still thinking the world made sense. She knew better now. The frontier didn't care about fairness. It didn't care that she'd spent 3 years training under Dr. Whitmore, that she could set a bone or deliver a baby, or stitch a wound clean enough to avoid infection. It didn't care that she'd come west to help people, that she'd worked for half what the men charged, that she'd saved a logger's life after a tree crushed his leg, or pulled a child through pneumonia when everyone said he'd die. None of that mattered, not after the Hamilton boy. She could still see his face, pale, feverish, his breathing shallow and wet. Scarlet fever. She'd known it the moment she walked into that big house on the hill. The rash, the swollen tongue, the way his mother hovered like a hawk, demanding answers Elena didn't have. Save him, Mrs. Hamilton had said. Not a request, a command. Elena had done everything right. Cool compresses, fluids, isolation. She'd stayed by his bedside for 2 days, barely sleeping, monitoring every breath. But scarlet fever didn't care about effort. It took who it wanted. And when the boy died on the 3rd morning, Mrs. Hamilton's grief turned sharp and vicious. She killed him, the woman had screamed, her voice carrying through the whole house, out into the yard, down into the town. She didn't know what she was doing. She let my boy die. It didn't matter that the doctor in town confirmed Elena had done everything correctly. It didn't matter that scarlet fever killed 1 in 5, that medicine could only do so much. Mrs. Hamilton had money, and money had a voice that drowned out truth. Within a week, Elena couldn't get work. Within 2, people crossed the street to avoid her. Within 3, the boarding house owner told her to leave. She'd packed her bag, taken what little money she had left, and walked until she found this cabin, abandoned, half-collapsed, miles from town. That was 2 months ago. Now the money was gone, the food was gone, and Elena was running out of reasons to keep going. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. The room tilted, then steadied. She needed water. There was a stream about 100 yards into the trees, still running despite the cold. She grabbed the pot, the one that wasn't catching roof drips, and pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders. The door stuck when she tried to open it, swollen from moisture. She had to yank hard, and when it finally gave, cold air hit her like a fist. The world outside was gray and white. Snow covered the ground in patches, clinging to the pine trees, making everything look softer than it was. The sky hung low and heavy, the kind of sky that promised more snow soon. Elena's breath plumed in front of her face. She stepped carefully down the 2 rotted porch steps and started toward the tree line. Her boots were thin, cracked in places. Snow seeped through, soaking her stockings. She'd learned to ignore it. The stream was still running, cutting a dark line through the snow. Elena knelt at the edge, her knees sinking into the frozen ground, and dipped the pot into the water. It was so cold it made her fingers ache immediately. She filled the pot halfway, all she could carry without spilling, and stood. That's when she saw the blood. It was a trail, dark red against white snow, leading from deeper in the forest toward her cabin. Fresh, still wet in places. Elena's heart kicked hard in her chest. She set the pot down carefully and followed the trail with her eyes. It wove between trees, uneven, like whoever made it had been stumbling. A lot of blood. Too much. She should go back inside, lock the door, pretend she hadn't seen it. But her feet were already moving. The trail led around a thick stand of pines and into a small clearing, and there, collapsed face down in the snow, was a man. Elena stopped. He wasn't moving. His coat was torn, soaked with blood. One arm was stretched out in front of him, like he'd been reaching for something. His hat had fallen off, revealing dark hair matted with red. She took a step closer. Then another. "Hello?" No response. She crouched beside him, her hand hovering over his shoulder. Then she touched him, gently, ready to pull back if he moved. His coat was stiff with cold and blood. She pushed him slightly, trying to see his face. He groaned. Elena jerked her hand back, but he didn't wake. Just that one sound, low and rough, proving he was alive. Barely. She looked around, no one else. No horse, no supplies, nothing. Just this man, bleeding out in the snow. "Can you hear me?" she asked. Another groan. His eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. Elena sat back on her heels, her mind racing. She should leave him. She had no food, no strength, no resources. Helping him would cost her everything. And for what? She didn't know him, didn't owe him. But her hands were already moving, checking his pulse at his neck. Weak, but steady. She peeled back his coat, searching for the wound. There, high on his left side, just below the ribs. A bullet hole. The entry wound was small, but blood had soaked through his shirt, pooling beneath him. "Damn it," she whispered. She couldn't carry him. Not in her condition. He was a big man, solid, probably twice her weight, but she couldn't leave him here either. He'd be dead in an hour. "Can you walk?" she asked, leaning close to his ear. "I need you to wake up, just enough to get inside." Nothing. Elena grabbed his shoulders and shook him, not gently. "Wake up. Now." His eyes opened. Just slits, unfocused. Gray eyes, she noticed, pale against the blood on his face. "You've been shot," she said, her voice firm. "I can help, but you have to move. Understand?" He stared at her, blinked slowly. "Get up," she said. "Come on." She slid her arm under his shoulders and pulled. He was heavy, dead weight, but something in her voice must have reached him because he shifted, trying to help. His breath came in short gasps. She got him to his knees then, straining, her vision going white at the edges, to his feet. He swayed. She braced herself against him, her legs shaking. "Cabin," she said, nodding toward the trees. "Right there, walk." They moved in a stumbling, lurching rhythm. He leaned on her so heavily she thought her knees would buckle, but she kept going, one step, another. The cabin door was open. She'd left it that way when she went for water. They half fell through it, collapsing onto the floor in a tangle. Elena rolled away, gasping for air. Her heart hammered in her chest. For a moment, she just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd just done. Then she pushed herself up and looked at him. He was on his back now, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Blood spread across the floor beneath him. She didn't have time to hesitate. Elena moved fast. She grabbed her nursing bag from the corner, the one thing she'd kept, even when everything else was gone. She dumped it out on the floor. Scissors, forceps, a needle and thread, bandages, a bottle of carbolic acid. Not enough. Never enough. She cut away his coat and shirt, exposing the wound. The bullet had gone in clean, but she couldn't tell if it had exited. She rolled him slightly. He groaned again but didn't wake, and checked his back. No exit wound. Of course not, she muttered. The bullet was still in there. She'd have to get it out. Elena's hands were shaking, not from fear, she'd done this before. From hunger, from exhaustion. She clenched her fists, willing them to steady. She poured carbolic acid over her hands, then over the forceps. The smell was sharp, familiar. She took a breath and pressed her fingers around the wound, feeling for the bullet. He jerked, a strangled sound escaping his throat. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." She worked quickly, her fingers probing the torn flesh. There, she felt it, lodged deep, near the rib. She grabbed the forceps and slid them into the wound, following the path her fingers had traced. The man's eyes flew open. He gasped, his whole body going rigid. "Don't move," Elena said sharply. "I'm almost there." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard, but enough to stop her. His eyes met hers, wide with pain. "You're going to die if I don't get this out," she said. "Let go." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his grip loosened. She went back in with the forceps, deeper. She felt the metal tip touch the bullet, slip, touch again. She adjusted the angle, clamped down, and pulled. The bullet came free. She dropped it on the floor and grabbed a cloth, pressing it hard against the wound. Blood soaked through immediately. She pressed harder. "Stay awake," she told him. "Look at me." His eyes were glassy, unfocused, but he was looking. "What's your name?" she asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "Cole," he rasped. "Cole," she repeated. "I'm Elena. You're going to be fine, but I need to stitch this. It's going to hurt." He nodded once, barely. Elena threaded the needle with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Muscle memory took over. She'd done this 100 times, in parlors, in kitchens, once in the back of a wagon racing toward town. She could do it now. She worked in silence, each stitch careful and precise. Cole didn't make a sound, but she could feel the tension in his body, the way he fought to stay still. When she tied off the last stitch, she sat back, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "Done," she said. He didn't respond. His eyes had closed again. Elena checked his pulse. Still there, weak but holding. She covered him with the only blanket she had, thin, moth-eaten, but better than nothing. Then she sat beside him, her back against the wall, and stared at the blood on her hands. What had she done? She'd used the last of her supplies on a stranger, a man she didn't know, who could be anyone. Outlaw, rancher, drifter. She had no idea. And now she was stuck with him, in a cabin with no food, no heat, and winter closing in. But when she looked at him, pale, unconscious, barely breathing, she didn't regret it. She'd spent 2 months dying slowly, alone, wondering if her life had meant anything. And now, for the first time since the Hamilton boy, she'd done the thing she was born to do. She'd saved someone. Elena pulled her knees to her chest and watched him breathe. In and out, in and out. Outside, the snow started falling again. Cole didn't wake for 3 days. Elena kept him alive through sheer stubbornness. She cleaned the wound twice a day with the last of her carbolic acid, changed the bandages she made from strips of her own dress, and forced water between his lips whenever he'd take it. He was feverish. His skin burned to the touch, and he muttered things she couldn't understand, names and fragments that meant nothing to her. She didn't sleep much. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she'd jolt awake, terrified he'd stopped breathing. On the second day, she ran out of firewood. Elena stood in the doorway, staring at the snow. It was coming down hard now, thick flakes that piled up fast. The forest was still out there, full of dead branches and fallen trees. But she didn't know if she had the strength to haul enough back. She went anyway. The cold bit through her shawl immediately. She wrapped her arms around herself and pushed into the trees, looking for anything dry enough to burn. Most of the deadfall was buried under snow. She dug with her hands, her fingers going numb, until she found a few branches small enough to carry. It took her an hour to gather enough for one night's fire. When she got back to the cabin, Cole was awake. He was sitting up, barely, propped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side. His face was gray, slick with sweat, but his eyes were open and focused. "You're up," Elena said, dropping the wood by the door. He looked at her, then at the cabin, then back at her. "Where am I?" "My cabin, about 10 miles west of town." She crossed to him and crouched down, reaching for the bandage. Let me see the wound. He leaned back slightly, wary. Who are you? The person who kept you alive, she said. Now let me check the stitches before you tear them open. He hesitated, then nodded. Elena peeled back the bandage carefully. The wound was red, swollen, but not infected. The stitches were holding. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. You're lucky, she said. Another inch to the right and the bullet would have hit your lung. Doesn't feel lucky, he muttered. She almost smiled. Can you tell me what happened? Cole was silent for a moment, his jaw tight. Ambush, he said finally. 3 men. I didn't see them coming. Who were they? Doesn't matter. It might, Elena said. If they're looking for you. He met her eyes. They think I'm dead. Are they right to think that? Should be. He shifted, wincing. How long have I been here? 3 days. He stared at her. 3 days? You were barely alive when I found you. The fever almost killed you twice. She stood and moved to the fire, adding one of the branches she'd brought in. You need to rest. Don't try to move too much. Why'd you help me? The question caught her off guard. She looked back at him, the stranger she'd bled herself dry to save, and didn't have a good answer. Because I could, she said. Cole studied her for a long moment. You don't look like you can help anyone. It wasn't cruel, just honest. And he was right. She was starving, exhausted, holding on by a thread. I'm a nurse, she said. Helping people is what I do. Out here? I used to work in town. She turned back to the fire. Not anymore. He didn't push, just watched her with those pale gray eyes like he was trying to figure her out. What's your name? He asked. Elena Ward. Cole Bennett. She nodded. The name didn't mean anything to her, but then again, she'd been cut off from the world for months. Nice to meet you, Cole Bennett. Try not to die in my cabin. He let out a short laugh, half breath, half pain. I'll do my best. By the 4th day, Cole could stand. Barely. He leaned heavily on the wall, his face pale and drawn, but he was upright. Elena watched from across the room, arms crossed. You should be lying down. I've been lying down for 4 days, he said. I need to move. You need to heal. I'll heal faster if my muscles don't forget how to work. She wanted to argue, but he had a point. Lying still too long could be just as dangerous as moving too soon. Fine. But if you tear those stitches, I'm not fixing them. He smirked. You would. He was right about that too. Cole made it 3 steps before he had to stop, breathing hard. Elena moved to help him, but he waved her off. I'm fine, he said. You're stubborn. So are you. She couldn't argue with that either. Over the next few days, they settled into a rhythm. Cole would push himself a little further each morning, standing longer, walking a few more steps. Elena would check his wound, clean it, rewrap it. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. But on the 6th day, Cole asked the question she'd been dreading. When's the last time you ate? Elena was crouched by the fire, feeding it the last of the wood she'd gathered. She didn't look up. Yesterday. Liar. She turned to glare at him. Excuse me? You haven't eaten since I got here, he said. Maybe longer. I'm fine. You're starving. Elena stood, her hands clenched into fists. What do you want me to say? That I have no food? That I've been giving you water I should have drunk myself? That I spent the last of my strength hauling you inside? Her voice cracked. You're right, I'm starving, but you're alive. So forgive me if I'm not in the mood for your observations. Cole stared at her. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat, the one she'd patched as best she could, and pulled out a small leather pouch. He tossed it to her. Elena caught it reflexively. It was heavy. She opened it. Money. Bills and coins, more than she'd seen in months. There's a trading post about 5 miles south, Cole said. Get food, supplies, whatever you need. She looked up at him. I can't take this. You just saved my life. You can take it. I don't even know who you are. Does it matter? She wanted to say yes, but the weight of the pouch in her hand, the promise of food, of survival, it was too much to refuse. Thank you, she said quietly. Cole nodded. Don't take too long. I'm a terrible cook. This time, she did smile. The trading post was exactly where Cole said it would be. A squat building with a smoking chimney and a hitching post out front. Elena tied the horse Cole had told her to take. Apparently he'd left it a mile from the cabin before collapsing, and went inside. The warmth hit her first, then the smell. Bread, coffee, smoked meat. Her stomach twisted so hard she thought she might be sick. An old man stood behind the counter, eyeing her with the kind of suspicion she'd grown used to. "Help you? I need supplies," Elena said. "Food, mostly, and firewood if you have it." He didn't move. "You got money?" She pulled out the pouch and set a few bills on the counter. His expression shifted, not friendly, but less hostile. "What do you need?" She bought flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, dried apples, a box of matches, 2 thick blankets. The man loaded everything into a crate without a word. As she was leaving, he called after her. "You're that nurse, aren't you? The one from town?" Elena stopped, her hand on the door. "Thought you'd left," he said. "I did. Probably for the best." His tone wasn't unkind, just factual. "People don't forget easy out here." She didn't respond, just picked up the crate and walked out. The ride back was slow. The horse plodded through the snow, and Elena let it set the pace. She kept thinking about the old man's words. People don't forget easy. She knew that. She'd been living it for months. But when she got back to the cabin and saw Cole standing in the doorway, still pale, still weak, but alive, she realized something. Maybe forgetting wasn't the point. Maybe surviving was. She dismounted and carried the crate inside. Cole took it from her, steady enough now to help, and set it on the floor. "You got enough?" he asked. "Enough for a while?" "Good." They unpacked in silence. Elena made coffee, strong and bitter, and they sat by the fire, drinking it slowly. "Who were the men who shot you?" she asked. Cole didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, his jaw working. "Men who want something I won't give them." "What do they want?" "My land." He glanced at her. "I own a ranch, big one. Good water, good grazing. There's a man, Merrick Holt, who's been buying up every piece of property in the valley, forcing people out if they won't sell." "And you won't sell?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it's mine." His voice was hard. "I built it. Every fence, every building. It's not his to take." Elena nodded slowly. She understood that. The need to hold on to something, even when the world was trying to rip it away. "What happens when you go back?" she asked. "I fight." "They'll try to kill you again." "Probably." "And you'll go anyway." He looked at her. "What else would I do?" She didn't have an answer for that. Outside, the wind howled and the snow kept falling. Cole started getting restless on the 8th day. Elena could see it in the way he paced the cabin. 3 steps, one direction, turn, 3 steps back. His hand kept going to his side, checking the wound through his shirt, like he was testing how much it still hurt. "You're not ready," Elena said without looking up from the pot of beans she was stirring. "Ready for what?" "Whatever you're planning." He stopped pacing. "I'm not planning anything." "You're a terrible liar." Cole crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. The color had come back to his face over the past few days, and he'd put on a little weight from the food Elena had bought. He looked less like a corpse now, more like a man who'd been shot and lived to be angry about it. "I need to get back to my ranch," he said. "Not yet. People are depending on me, and they'll keep depending on you if you tear open those stitches and bleed out halfway there." Elena set the spoon down and turned to face him. "Another week. Minimum." "I don't have a week." "You don't have a choice." They stared at each other. Cole's jaw was tight, his eyes hard, but Elena didn't back down. She'd learned a long time ago that sick people made bad decisions and stubborn men made worse ones. Finally, Cole looked away. "1 week," he said. "Then I'm leaving whether you like it or not." "Fine." "Fine." Elena went back to stirring the beans and Cole went back to pacing. That night, Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up fast, her heart hammering. The cabin was dark except for the dying embers in the fireplace. Cole was already on his feet, one hand pressed to his side, the other reaching for something Elena couldn't see. "What was that?" she whispered. Quiet. Another sound. Footsteps outside, crunching through snow. More than one person. Cole moved to the wall beside the door, his movements careful despite the pain she knew he was in. He picked up a piece of firewood, the only weapon in reach, and held it like a club. Elena's mouth went dry. She stood slowly, looking around for anything useful. Her nursing bag. A kitchen knife. Nothing that would stop a man with a gun. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, low and rough, came from just outside the door. "Bennett? We know you're in there." Cole didn't respond. His knuckles were white around the firewood. "Come out and we'll make it quick," the voice continued. "Stay inside and we'll burn you out." Elena's breath caught. Cole glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Then he turned back to the door. "You already tried killing me once, Wade," Cole called out. "Didn't take then either." A pause. Then a different voice. Younger, uncertain. "Boss said you were dead." "Boss was wrong." "Then we'll fix that." The door exploded inward. Elena stumbled back as two men rushed in, one tall and broad, the other wiry and quick. Cole swung the firewood hard, catching the first man across the jaw. The crack was sickening. The man went down. The second man pulled a knife. Cole tried to block, but he was too slow. The blade slashed across his forearm. Blood welled up immediately, dark against his skin. Cole grunted but didn't stop moving. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and slammed him against the wall. The knife clattered to the floor. Elena dove for it. Her fingers closed around the handle just as the first man, Wade apparently, started getting up. Blood ran from his mouth and his eyes were wild. He saw Elena with the knife and lunged. She didn't think, just moved. The knife went in below his ribs, angled up. Wade's eyes went wide. He grabbed her shoulders, his weight pressing down on her, and for a horrible moment Elena thought they were both going to fall. Then Cole was there, pulling Wade off her, letting him drop to the floor. Wade lay still. Elena stared at the knife in her hand. It was covered in blood. So were her hands. She couldn't stop shaking. Elena. She looked up. Cole was holding the second man against the wall, one forearm pressed across his throat. The man's face was red, his eyes bulging. "Is he dead?" Cole asked, nodding toward Wade. Elena knelt beside the body. Her hands were still shaking as she checked for a pulse. Nothing. She'd killed him. She'd actually killed him. "Elena." "Yes," she said. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "He's dead." Cole nodded once. Then he looked at the man he was holding. "Where's the third one?" The man gasped, trying to speak. Cole eased the pressure just enough. "Outside," the man choked out. "Watching the back." "Watching for what?" In case you ran." Cole glanced at Elena. "Can you shoot a gun?" "What? Can you shoot?" Yes, I have before, not in a long time." Cole let go of the man who collapsed to his knees, coughing. Cole pulled a revolver from the dead man's belt and handed it to Elena. "There's a window in the back. Man out there won't expect you. Open it, aim, pull the trigger." Elena took the gun. It was heavier than she remembered. "What are you going to do?" "Keep this one from warning his friend." She wanted to argue, to say this was insane, that she was a nurse, not a killer. But the body on the floor said otherwise. Elena moved to the back of the cabin. The window was small, covered with a piece of cloth she'd nailed up to keep out the cold. She pulled it aside slowly, peering out into the darkness. At first she didn't see anything, just snow and trees and shadows. Then movement, a figure standing about 20 yards away, rifle in hand, watching the back of the cabin. Elena's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the gun. She thought about this Hamilton boy, about Mrs. Hamilton's screams, about the mob outside the estate gates. She thought about starving in this cabin, alone, waiting to die. Then she thought about Cole, bleeding on her floor, and the choice she'd made to save him. She opened the window. The man outside turned at the sound. Elena fired. The recoil nearly knocked her backward. The shot was deafening in the small cabin. She had no idea if she'd hit him, but she heard a shout, then the sound of someone running. She fired again and again. The third shot was met with silence. Elena stood frozen, the gun still raised, her ears ringing. Then Cole was beside her, looking out the window. "He's running," Cole said. "You didn't hit him, but he's not coming back tonight." Elena lowered the gun. Her whole body was shaking now, not just her hands. I didn't mean to." "You did fine." Cole took the gun from her gently. Better than fine. She looked at the body on the floor, at the blood, at the knife still lying where she'd dropped it. "I killed someone," she said. "You defended yourself." "I'm a nurse. I save people." Cole's expression softened. "You saved me, and you just saved yourself. Sometimes that's the same thing." Elena didn't know what to say to that. She just stood there, staring at her hands, at the blood drying on her fingers. Cole turned back to the man he'd been holding. The man was still on his knees, his face pale, his hands raised. "What's your name?" "Danny," the man said quickly. "Danny Pierce." "You work for Merrick Holt?" Danny nodded. "How many men does he have?" "I don't know. A lot. 20 maybe. And he sent 3 of you to finish me off. He said you were already dead, that we just had to check, make sure." Danny's voice cracked. "I didn't want to come. Wade made me." Cole studied him for a long moment. "You're going to go back to Holt, and you're going to tell him I'm alive. Tell him I'm coming, and tell him that the next man he sends after me won't be lucky enough to run. Understand?" Danny nodded frantically. "Now get out." Danny scrambled to his feet and ran for the door, not even looking back at Wade's body. When he was gone, Cole shut the door, or what was left of it, and leaned against it. His face was gray again, and blood was dripping from his arm where the knife had cut him. "Sit," Elena said, her voice steady now. "Let me see that." Cole didn't argue. He sat by the fire, and Elena brought her bag over. The cut was deep but clean. She cleaned it with water. Her carbolic acid was long gone, and stitched it as carefully as she'd stitched his side. "You're good at this," Cole said. "I've had practice." When she was done, she wrapped the wound with a strip of cloth and sat back. "We can't stay here." "I know. That man, Danny, he'll tell Holt where we are. They'll come back, more of them this time." Cole nodded. "We leave in the morning." "You're not strong enough." "I'm strong enough to ride." Elena looked at the body on the floor. She'd need to move it before morning. The thought made her stomach turn, but she pushed the feeling down. "Where will we go?" "My ranch. It's the only place I have left." He met her eyes. "You don't have to come. I can give you money, a horse. You can go anywhere you want." She almost laughed. "Where would I go? Back to town, where they tried to starve me out? Somewhere new, where I'd have nothing?" She shook her head. "I'll come with you." "It's going to be dangerous." "It's already dangerous." Cole didn't argue. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Elena packed what little they had, food, blankets, her nursing bag. Cole dragged Wade's body outside and covered it with snow. Neither of them talked about it. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, they saddled Cole's horse and Elena's borrowed mare. The cabin looked small and pathetic in the gray morning light, the broken door hanging crooked on its hinges. Elena had lived there for 2 months. It had been her prison and her refuge. Now it was just a place she was leaving behind. They rode south through the snow. Cole led the way, his posture stiff in the saddle, one hand pressed to his side. Elena followed, her mind numb, her hands still stained with blood she couldn't wash away. By midday, the snow had stopped, and the sky cleared to a pale, cold blue. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and white. Cole slowed his horse and pointed to a valley below. "That's it," he said. "The Bennett Ranch." Elena looked. She could see buildings in the distance, a house, a barn, fences stretching across the land. Smoke rose from a chimney. It looked peaceful, almost welcoming. "How many people live there?" she asked. "Just my foreman and his family, a few ranch hands. Good people. Will they trust me?" Cole glanced at her. "They'll trust you if I tell them to." They rode down into the valley. The closer they got, the more Elena could see. Cattle grazing in the snow, horses in a corral, a woman hanging laundry despite the cold. When the woman saw them coming, she stopped and stared. Then she ran toward the house, shouting something Elena couldn't hear. By the time they reached the main house, a man was waiting on the porch. He was older than Cole, with gray hair and a weathered face. His hand rested on the gun at his hip. "Cole," the man said, his voice flat. "Heard you were dead." "Heard wrong." Cole dismounted, wincing as his boots hit the ground. "This is Elena Ward. She's the reason I'm not." The man's eyes flicked to Elena, then back to Cole. "What happened?" "Holt's men ambushed me. Elena patched me up." Cole walked toward the porch, his movement slow but steady. "We need to get inside. There's a lot to talk about." The man nodded and stepped aside. Elena dismounted and followed Cole into the house. It was warm inside, a fire burning in the hearth. The woman from the yard appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Grace, this is Elena," Cole said. "Elena, this is Grace and Tom Whitfield. They run this place when I'm not here." Grace nodded, her expression uncertain. "You look half dead, Mr. Bennett." "Feel worse than that." Cole sank into a chair by the fire. "Tom, gather the men. We need to talk strategy." "Strategy for what?" "For war." Tom's jaw tightened. "Holt's pushing again?" "He already pushed. Now I'm pushing back." Grace looked at Elena. "You a nurse?" "Yes." "Good. He needs one." Grace disappeared into the back of the house and returned with a basin of water and clean cloths. "You can work here." Elena took the supplies and knelt beside Cole. She checked the wound on his side, still closed, though the stitches were strained, and the fresh cut on his arm. "You need rest," she said quietly. "Later." "Cole, later." Tom returned with 3 men, ranch hands, Elena guessed, from the dirt on their boots and the hard look in their eyes. They stood in a loose circle around Cole, waiting. "Holt tried to kill me," Cole said. "Sent 3 men. I'm still here. They're not." One of the men whistled low. "He's not going to like that." "I don't care what he likes." Cole leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "He's been buying up land, squeezing out anyone who won't sell. He wants this valley, and he thinks fear will get it for him. But fear only works if people give in." "What are you saying?" Tom asked. "I'm saying we don't give in. We hold this land. We fight if we have to." "There's 5 of us and 20 of him," one of the men said. "That's not a fight. That's a massacre." "Not if we're smart." Cole looked at each of them in turn. "Holt's men are hired guns. They fight for money, not loyalty. We fight for our homes. That makes us stronger." The men exchanged glances. Elena could see the doubt in their faces. They wanted to believe him, but belief didn't stop bullets. "What do you need from us?" Tom asked finally. "Fortify the ranch. Set up watch rotations. Anyone comes near who isn't one of us, we stop them." Cole's voice was hard. "And we get word to the other ranchers. Let them know what Holt's doing. If we stand together, he can't take us all." Tom nodded slowly. "I'll send riders out tomorrow." "Good." The men filed out, talking in low voices. Grace lingered in the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're going to get yourself killed," she said. "Maybe." "And everyone here with you." Cole didn't respond. Grace shook her head and left. Elena finished wrapping the bandage around Cole's arm. "She's right, you know." "I know." "Then why are you doing this?" Cole looked at her. "Because if I don't, Holt wins, and men like him always want more. Today it's land, tomorrow it's water. The day after, it's everything." He stood slowly, using the chair for support. "I won't let him have it." Elena understood. It was the same reason she'd stayed in that cabin, starving, instead of crawling back to town and begging for scraps. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible. Over the next few days, the ranch transformed. Tom and the men built barricades, reinforced the fences, and set up watch posts at the edges of the property. Grace moved supplies into the house: food, ammunition, medical supplies Elena had asked for. Everyone moved with a quiet urgency, like they were preparing for a storm. Elena found herself in the middle of it. Grace put her to work organizing the medical supplies, teaching her where things were kept, how the ranch operated. The men started coming to her with cuts and bruises, small injuries they'd normally ignore. She patched them up without comment, and slowly, they stopped looking at her like a stranger. On the 3rd night, Cole found her outside, leaning against the fence, staring at the mountains. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth from his coat. "You're good with them. The men, Grace." "I'm just doing what I know how to do." "It's more than that." Cole was quiet for a moment. They trust you. They trust you. That's different. Elena turned to look at him. His face was shadowed in the moonlight, but she could see the weight he carried. Why me, Cole? You could have sent me away with money and a horse. You didn't owe me anything. You saved my life. So you're returning the favor? Maybe. He looked at her. Or maybe I just didn't want you to be alone anymore. The words hit her harder than she expected. She'd been alone for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone see her as more than a mistake, more than a failure. I killed a man, she said quietly. I know. Does it get easier? Cole didn't answer right away. No, he said finally. But you learned to live with it. Elena nodded. She didn't know if that was enough, but it was something. The riders Tom had sent out started coming back. They brought news, and none of it was good. Holt had bought or forced out 6 ranchers in the past month. 2 more had agreed to sell after their livestock mysteriously died. 1 man had simply disappeared. People are scared, Tom reported. Most of them won't fight. Then we fight without them, Cole said. But 2 ranchers did come. A man named Henry Oakes, who owned land to the west, and a widow named Catherine Price, whose husband had died the year before. They arrived with their families and what supplies they could carry. Elena met Catherine on the porch. The woman was in her 40s, tall and thin, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. You're the nurse, Catherine said. I am. Good. My youngest has a cough that won't quit. Can you look at him? Elena nodded and followed Catherine to the barn, where her family had set up camp. The boy was maybe 8, pale and feverish. Elena examined him, chest tight, breathing shallow. Pneumonia, probably. He needs to stay warm and dry, Elena said. I'll make a tincture to help with the cough, but he needs rest. Rest, Catherine repeated bitterly. Hard to rest when men with guns are coming. We'll keep him safe. Will you? Catherine looked at her. You really believe that? Elena didn't know how to answer. She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe they could hold off Holt's men, that they'd survive this. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. I believe we'll try, she said. Catherine's expression softened slightly. I suppose that's all anyone can do. That night, Elena made the tincture for the boy and delivered it to the barn. Catherine thanked her, and Elena stayed for a while, talking quietly with the families who'd taken refuge there. They were scared. She could see it in their faces, but they hadn't run. That had to count for something. When she returned to the house, Cole was standing by the window, looking out at the dark valley. Can't sleep either? Elena asked. They're coming, he said. Soon. How do you know? Because that's what I do. He turned to face her. Holt knows where I am now. He knows people are gathering here. He won't wait. What will you do when they come? Whatever I have to. Elena crossed the room and stood beside him. I'm not leaving. I wasn't going to ask you to. Good. They stood there in silence, watching the night. Somewhere out there, men were planning to kill them. But here, in this house, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stay and fight, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt like she belonged. The attack came 3 days later, just before dawn. Elena woke to the sound of gunfire. She sat up fast, her heart pounding. Outside, men were shouting, more shots, the sharp crack of rifles. She grabbed her bag and ran downstairs. Cole was already at the door, rifle in hand, his face hard. Stay inside, he said. Like hell. He didn't have time to argue. He stepped outside and Elena followed. The yard was chaos. Holt's men were everywhere, on horseback, on foot, firing at the house and the barn. Tom and the ranch hands were shooting back from behind barricades, their faces grim. Elena dropped to her knees behind a water trough and looked around. One of the ranch hands was down, clutching his leg. Blood soaked through his pants. She ran to him. Bullets kicked up dirt around her, but she didn't stop. She reached the man and dragged him behind the trough. He was young, maybe 20, and his face was white with pain. I've got you, Elena said. She tore open his pant leg. The bullet had gone clean through his thigh, missing the bone. Lucky. She pressed a cloth to the wound hard, and he gasped. Am I going to die? Not today. More gunfire. Elena worked fast, tying off the wound as tightly as she could. The man's breathing was ragged, but he'd live. She looked up and saw Cole across the yard. He was standing in the open, rifle raised, firing with calm precision. A man on horseback charged at him. Cole didn't move, just aimed and fired. The rider fell. Elena's stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. The fight lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the shooting finally stopped, Holt's men retreated, leaving 2 bodies in the dirt. Elena stood slowly, her hands covered in blood. Around her, people were emerging from cover, checking on each other, counting the cost. Tom walked over to Cole. "We got lucky." "That wasn't luck," Cole said. "That was a warning." "A warning?" "Holt wanted us to know he's serious. Next time, he'll bring more men." Elena looked at the bodies in the yard, at the wounded man she'd just saved, at the fear in everyone's faces. She thought saving Cole would be the hardest thing she'd ever do. She'd been wrong. They buried the 2 dead men that afternoon in shallow graves at the edge of the property. Nobody said much. Tom handled the shovels, and the ranch hands did the digging without complaint, their faces blank. Elena watched from the porch, her arms wrapped tight around herself despite the coat Grace had given her. Cole stood apart from the others, his jaw set, staring at nothing. When it was done, Tom walked over to him. "We need to talk." They went inside. Elena followed without asking permission. Grace was already there, sitting at the table with Catherine Price and Henry Oakes. The room felt smaller with all of them in it. "We can't keep doing this," Tom said. "We got lucky today, but Holt's not going to keep sending small groups. Next time, it'll be all of them." "I know," Cole said. "Then what's the plan?" Henry asked. He was a broad man with a thick beard and nervous hands that kept fidgeting with his hat. "Because sitting here waiting to get shot doesn't seem like much of one." "We're not sitting," Cole said. "We're fortifying, building our position." "For what? A siege?" Catherine's voice was sharp. "I've got 3 children in that barn, Mr. Bennett. How long do you think they'll last when Holt cuts off our supplies and starves us out?" Cole didn't answer right away. Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested on the edge of the table like he needed something to hold on to. "Then we don't wait for him to come to us," Cole said finally. "We go to him." The room went silent. "You want to attack Holt?" Tom said slowly. "With what? 5 men and a prayer?" "I want to hit him where it hurts. His operation runs on fear and control. We take that away. We take away his power." "How?" Cole looked at each of them in turn. "Holt's been buying up land with money he doesn't have. He's borrowing heavy from banks back east, using the land as collateral. If we can prove he's using force and fraud to acquire property, the banks will pull his credit. Without money, his hired guns walk. Without guns, he's just a man with debts." "That's a big if," Henry said. "It's the only option we have." Catherine leaned forward. "And how exactly do we prove fraud?" "We get documentation, contracts, ledgers, anything that shows how he's operating. Then we take it to the territorial judge in Denver." "Holt keeps those records locked up tighter than a bank vault," Tom said. "You'd have to break into his office." "Then that's what we do." Grace stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You're talking about walking into the lion's den. I'm talking about ending this before more people die." Cole's voice was hard. "Holt thinks we're cornered. He thinks all he has to do is keep pushing until we break. But if we move first, if we take the fight to him, we change the game." "Or we get ourselves killed," Grace said. "Maybe." Cole looked at her. "But I'd rather die fighting than starve waiting." No one spoke for a long moment. Elena could hear the wind outside, the creak of the house settling. She thought about the bodies they'd just buried, about the young ranch hand she'd patched up, his leg torn open by a bullet meant to kill, about the cabin where she'd nearly died alone. "I'll go with you," Elena said. Everyone turned to look at her. "You're a nurse," Grace said, "not a soldier." "I'm a nurse who's already killed 1 man and shot at another. I think that ship has sailed." Elena met Cole's eyes. "You'll need someone who can move quietly. Someone Holt's men won't expect. I can do that." "Absolutely not," Cole said. "Why? Because I'm a woman?" "Because you're not trained for this. Neither are half your men." Elena stood, her hands flat on the table. "I've spent months hiding, starving, watching the world decide I don't matter. I'm done hiding. If you're going to do this, I'm coming." Cole stared at her. She could see the argument forming in his eyes, but she didn't back down. She's got a point, Tom said quietly. A woman moving through town at night won't draw attention the way we would. And if things go wrong, she can claim she was lost or looking for help. Things won't go wrong, Cole said. They always go wrong. Cole's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena for a long moment, then nodded once. Fine, but you follow my lead. No heroics. I'll leave that to you. Catherine actually smiled at that. They spent the rest of the day planning. Holt's office was in town above the land registry building. 2 stories, 1 entrance, guards posted outside at night. Getting in would be hard. Getting out would be harder. We'll need a distraction, Tom said. Something to pull the guards away. A fire, Henry suggested. Small one, controlled. Far enough away that it doesn't spread, but close enough to draw attention. Cole nodded. That could work. What about the safe? Elena asked. If the documents are locked up, how do we get them? We blow it, Cole said simply. You know how to do that? I've done it before. Elena decided not to ask when or why. They set the plan for 2 nights later. That gave them time to prepare, to scout, to make sure everyone knew their part. Grace hated it. Elena could see it in the way the woman moved around the house, tight-lipped and tense. But she didn't argue, just made sure they had supplies, ammunition, a clear route back to the ranch if things went bad. The night before they left, Elena found herself unable to sleep. She sat on the porch in the cold, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. The sky was clear for once, sharp and bright. It reminded her of nights in Philadelphia, sitting on her parents' roof, listening to her mother talk about constellations. That felt like a different life, a different person. The door opened behind her. Cole stepped out, his coat unbuttoned, his breath fogging in the air. You should be resting, he said. So should you. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a while, neither of them spoke. Just sat there in the cold, watching the night. You don't have to do this, Cole said finally. I meant what I said. I can give you money, a horse. You can leave tonight and be gone before anyone knows. Is that what you want? I want you to be safe. Safe. Elena let out a short laugh. I haven't been safe since I stepped off the train in Colorado. Safety is not really an option for people like us. People like us? People the world's already decided don't matter. Cole was quiet for a moment. You matter. The words were simple, but they hit Elena like a punch. She turned to look at him. His face was shadowed, but she could see his eyes, steady and serious. You don't know me, she said. I know you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. I know you've been living on nothing and still found a way to keep going. I know you stood in front of armed men and didn't break. He paused. That's enough. Elena didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and looked back at the stars. They rode out the next evening, just after sunset. Cole, Elena, Tom, and 2 of the ranch hands, a quiet man named Jim, and a younger one called Peters. 6 people total, moving through the darkness toward a town that had already tried to destroy one of them. The ride took 3 hours. They stayed off the main road, cutting through forest and rocky terrain that made the horses nervous. No one talked. The only sounds were hoofbeats and the wind through the trees. When they reached the outskirts of town, Cole raised his hand and they stopped. Jim, Peters, you're on the distraction. Wait for my signal, then start the fire in the alley behind the saloon. Make it loud. Tom, you're with me and Elena. We go in through the back of the land registry building. What's the signal? Jim asked. Cole pulled out a small mirror and angled it to catch the moonlight. 3 flashes. You'll see it. They split up. Jim and Peters disappeared into the shadows. Tom, Cole, and Elena dismounted and tied their horses to a tree, then moved toward the building. The town was quiet. A few lamps burned in windows, but most people were inside, doors shut against the cold. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might give them away. She kept her breathing steady, her footsteps light. The land registry building was dark. No lights in the windows, no guards visible. But Elena knew they were there, somewhere, waiting. Cole led them around to the back. There was a door, locked. He knelt beside it, pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket, and went to work. The lock clicked open in less than a minute. Where'd you learn that? Elena whispered. Long story. They slipped inside. The building smelled like paper and dust. Cole lit a small lantern, keeping the flame low, and they moved through the hallway toward a staircase. Upstairs, the office door was also locked. Cole worked the lock again while Tom kept watch at the top of the stairs. Elena stood behind Cole, her hands clenched, listening for any sound that didn't belong. The door opened. Holt's office was exactly what Elena expected. Expensive furniture, thick rugs, a massive desk covered in papers, and against the far wall, a safe. Cole crossed to it immediately. Tom, watch the door. Elena, help me with this. Elena moved to his side. The safe was heavy iron, built to withstand just about anything. Cole pulled a small package from his coat, powder wrapped in cloth. We're really doing this, Elena said, too late to turn back now. He worked quickly, packing the powder around the lock, threading a fuse through the crack in the door. When I light this, we have about 30 seconds before it blows. Get behind the desk and cover your ears. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Cole struck a match. The fuse caught, hissing and sparking. Elena ran for the desk and ducked behind it. Tom was already there, his eyes wide. Cole dove in beside them, just as the blast went off. The noise was deafening. Elena felt it in her chest, rattling her bones. Smoke filled the room, thick and choking. She coughed, her eyes watering. Move, Cole said, already on his feet. The safe door hung open, twisted metal and broken hinges. Inside were stacks of papers, ledgers, contracts. Cole grabbed as many as he could, shoving them into a leather satchel. Got it, he said. Let's go. They ran for the stairs. But before they reached them, the front door burst open below. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Heavy boots, multiple men. Back, Tom hissed. Out the window. They ran for the office window. Cole threw it open and looked down. 2 stories. A hard drop onto dirt and stone. We jump, he said. Are you insane? Elena looked at the drop. Her stomach turned. You got a better idea? Footsteps in the hallway, voices shouting. The door rattled. Cole grabbed Elena's hand. On 3. 1. He didn't get to 3. Tom shoved them both out the window. Elena fell. The ground rushed up fast. She hit hard, her shoulder taking most of the impact. Pain exploded through her arm, sharp and blinding. She rolled, gasping, trying to get air back into her lungs. Cole landed beside her, grunting. Tom came next, hitting the ground and stumbling but staying upright. Run, Tom said. They ran. Behind them, men poured out of the building. Shouts filled the air. A gunshot cracked, and Elena heard the bullet hit stone somewhere to her left. They cut through an alley between buildings, toward the edge of town where they'd left the horses. Elena's shoulder screamed with every step, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't. Another shot. This one closer. Tom went down. Elena skidded to a stop. Tom was on the ground, clutching his side, blood already seeping between his fingers. Go, he said through gritted teeth. Get out of here. Not without you, Cole said. He grabbed Tom's arm and hauled him up. Tom's face went white, but he stayed on his feet. Elena took his other arm. Together they half carried, half dragged him toward the horses. Behind them, the shouts were getting closer. They reached the horses. Cole lifted Tom into a saddle, then swung up behind him to keep him upright. Elena mounted her own horse, her shoulder throbbing, and they kicked the animals into a gallop. The town disappeared behind them. They rode hard through the darkness, the satchel of documents bouncing against Cole's side. Tom slumped forward in the saddle. Elena didn't know if Jim and Peters had made it out. Didn't know if they were being followed. All she knew was the pounding of hooves and the cold air burning her lungs. They didn't stop until they were miles away, deep in the forest. Cole finally pulled his horse to a halt and dismounted, easing Tom down carefully. How bad? Elena asked, sliding off her own horse. Her shoulder nearly gave out when she hit the ground, but she forced herself to move. Tom's face was pale, slick with sweat. Bad enough. Elena knelt beside him and pulled his hand away from the wound. The bullet had gone in just below his ribs, angled down. Blood pulsed out with every heartbeat. Her stomach dropped. Cole, I need light. Cole lit the lantern. Elena worked fast, tearing strips from her own shirt to pack the wound. Tom hissed through his teeth but didn't cry out. Can you fix it? Cole asked. Not here. He needs a real surgery. Clean tools. Time. Elena tied off the bandage as tightly as she could. We have to get him back to the ranch. That's hours from here. Then we better move fast. They got Tom back on the horse. He was barely conscious now, his breathing shallow. Elena rode close beside Cole, watching Tom's back, ready to catch him if he started to fall. The ride back was a nightmare. Every jolt, every rough patch of ground made Tom groan. Elena's shoulder was on fire, but she ignored it, focused on keeping Tom upright, keeping him breathing. Dawn was breaking when they finally saw the ranch. Grace was waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. When she saw Tom's condition, she ran toward them. "Get him inside," Elena said. "I need boiling water, clean cloths, whiskey." They carried Tom into the house and laid him on the kitchen table. Grace moved fast, bringing everything Elena asked for. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "What can I do?" she asked. "Keep everyone out of this room," Elena said, "and pray this works." Catherine nodded and disappeared. Elena scrubbed her hands with soap and whiskey, then turned to Tom. Cole stood beside her, his face grim. "You ever done this before?" he asked quietly. "Once." Elena didn't mention that the patient had died. She cut away Tom's shirt. The wound was worse than she'd thought, deep. The bullet lodged somewhere near his liver. If she didn't get it out, he'd die. If she made one wrong move, he'd die. Her hands were shaking. Cole's hand settled on her shoulder, the good one. "You can do this." Elena took a breath, then another. Then she picked up the scalpel Grace had found and went to work. The surgery took 2 hours. Elena worked in silence. Her world narrowed to the wound in front of her, the blood on her hands, the steady rhythm of Tom's breathing. Grace held the lantern. Cole kept watch, his hand never far from Elena's shoulder. When she finally pulled the bullet free and dropped it into a dish, her whole body was shaking. "Done," she whispered. She stitched the wound closed, her fingers moving on autopilot. When the last stitch was tied, she stepped back and nearly collapsed. Cole caught her. "He's going to make it?" Grace asked, her voice raw. "I don't know." Elena looked at Tom's pale face. "The next few hours will tell." They moved him to a bed. Grace stayed with him, holding his hand, whispering things Elena couldn't hear. Elena walked outside, needing air, needing space. The sun was fully up now, bright and cold. The ranch looked peaceful in the morning light, like nothing bad had ever happened here. Cole followed her out. He had the satchel in his hand. "We got them," he said, holding up the documents. "Contracts showing Holt used threats and violence to force sales. Ledgers showing he's in debt up to his neck. This is enough to bring him down." Elena stared at the satchel. They'd risked everything for those papers. Tom was dying on a table inside. Jim and Peters were missing, maybe dead, all for a bag of documents. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Cole looked at her. "Ask me again when this is over." Elena nodded. She didn't have the energy to argue. "Your shoulder," Cole said, noticing the way she was holding her arm. "Let me see." "It's fine." "Elena." She let him look. He moved her arm gently, checking the joint. She winced. "Probably dislocated when you hit the ground," he said. "I can set it, but it's going to hurt." "Everything hurts." Cole positioned himself behind her, his hands firm on her arm and shoulder. "On 3. 1, 2. He pulled on 2. Elena felt the joint pop back into place, a bright explosion of pain that made her gasp. Then, slowly, the pain faded to a dull ache. "You're welcome," Cole said. "I hate you." "No, you don't." He was right. She didn't. They stood there for a moment, not talking, just being. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of pine and snow. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we take these to Denver. Get them in front of the judge. End this." "And if Holt comes for us first?" "Then we hold the line until we can't anymore." Cole's voice was steady. "But we don't give up. Not now." Elena looked at the ranch, at the people inside who'd chosen to stay and fight. At Grace, sitting vigil over a man who might not see tomorrow. At Catherine's children, playing in the barn despite everything. She thought about the Elena who'd arrived in Colorado 2 years ago. Young, hopeful, thinking she could save the world. That Elena was gone, buried somewhere in the snow with all her idealism. But the Elena standing here now, the one who'd killed a man, jumped out of a second-story window and cut a bullet out of someone's gut, she was still standing, still fighting. Maybe that was enough. All right, she said. Let's end this. Inside, Tom's eyes fluttered open. He looked around the room confused, then saw Grace beside him. You're still here, he whispered. Where else would I be? Grace said, tears streaming down her face. Tom smiled weakly. Thought I was done for. Not yet. Grace squeezed his hand. Not yet. Elena watched from the doorway. Cole stood beside her. He's going to make it, Cole said quietly. Maybe. He is. Elena wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe they all would. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it true. Outside, the sky was beginning to cloud over. Another storm coming. Elena could feel it in the air, in the way the temperature dropped, in the stillness that settled over the valley. They had maybe 2 days before Holt realized what they'd done. 2 days to get to Denver and back. 2 days to change everything. It wasn't much time, but it was all they had. They left for Denver at noon. Cole wanted to go alone, but Elena refused to let him. You need someone who can talk to the judge if you get shot on the way, she said, already packing supplies into saddlebags. I'm not going to get shot. You said that last time. Cole didn't have an answer for that. Grace protested, saying they needed Elena at the ranch in case Tom took a turn for the worse. But Tom himself settled it, sitting up in bed despite the pain, his face still pale but his voice steady. Grace can handle things here, he said. You two go finish what we started. So they went. Just the two of them, riding hard through country that was growing colder by the hour. The storm Elena had felt coming was building in the west, dark clouds piling up like a wall. They needed to reach Denver before it hit. The first day passed without incident. They rode until dark, stopped to rest the horses for a few hours, then pushed on through the night. Elena's shoulder ached with every movement, but she gritted her teeth and kept pace. Cole checked on her periodically, his eyes scanning her face for signs she was struggling, but she never complained. You're tougher than you look, he said during one of their brief stops. I've had to be. They reached the outskirts of Denver late the next afternoon. The city sprawled across the valley, buildings made of brick and wood, streets crowded with wagons and people. It was bigger than any place Elena had seen since leaving Philadelphia. The noise hit her first, the constant rumble of voices and movement. Then the smell, coal smoke, horses, unwashed bodies packed too close together. Judge Cartwright's office is near the courthouse, Cole said, guiding his horse through the crowded streets. We get the documents to him, he issues a warrant, and Holt's operation falls apart. Just like that? Nothing's ever just like that. But it's the best shot we have. The courthouse was a massive stone building with columns out front and steps that seemed to go on forever. Cole and Elena tied their horses and climbed the stairs, the satchel of documents clutched tight in Cole's hand. Inside, a clerk sat behind a desk, barely looking up when they entered. Help you? We need to see Judge Cartwright, Cole said. It's urgent. Everyone says it's urgent? You got an appointment? No, but then you'll have to wait. Judge is hearing cases all day. Come back tomorrow morning. We don't have until tomorrow, Elena said. People are going to die if we wait. The clerk finally looked up, his expression somewhere between annoyed and bored. People are always dying, ma'am. World keeps spinning. Come back tomorrow. Cole's hand moved toward his gun. Elena caught his wrist. Don't, she said quietly. He's not listening. Then we make him listen. Elena turned to the clerk. What's your name? The man blinked. What? Your name. I'd like to know who I'm talking to. Martin? Charles Martin. Mr. Martin, my name is Elena Ward. This is Cole Bennett. We've just ridden for 2 days straight with evidence that a man named Merrick Holt has been using violence, fraud, and intimidation to steal land across the Western Valley. He's bought off local law enforcement, killed people who stood in his way, and he's currently planning to do it again. We have contracts, ledgers, everything the judge needs to issue a warrant. So I understand you have procedures, Mr. Martin, but I'm asking you, as one human being to another, to please let us see Judge Cartwright. Today. Right now. Martin stared at her. Then he looked at Cole, at the satchel, back at Elena. Wait here, he said, standing. Don't move. He disappeared through a door behind his desk. Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That actually worked, Cole said. People respond better when you treat them like people. I'll remember that. 10 minutes later, Martin returned with an older man in a black robe. Judge Cartwright was tall and thin, with white hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're the ones with evidence against Merrick Holt?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Cole said. "Come with me." They followed the judge into his chambers, a wood-paneled room lined with law books and smelling faintly of tobacco. Cartwright sat behind a massive desk and gestured for them to sit. "Show me what you have." Cole opened the satchel and spread the documents across the desk. Cartwright put on a pair of spectacles and began reading. He worked in silence, his expression giving nothing away. Elena sat rigid in her chair, her hands clenched in her lap. Cole looked calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. After what felt like an eternity, Cartwright set down the papers and looked at them. "Where did you get these?" "Holt's office," Cole said. 2 nights ago." "You broke in?" "Yes. That makes this evidence inadmissible in court." Elena's stomach dropped. Cole leaned forward. "You're telling me it doesn't matter that Holt's a criminal because we broke the law proving it?" "I'm telling you the law has rules, Mr. Bennett, rules that exist for good reasons. Rules that protect men like Holt. Sometimes." Cartwright took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "But they also protect people like you. If I ignore proper procedure for evidence I like, I have to ignore it for evidence I don't. That's a door I won't open." "So we did all this for nothing," Elena said quietly. "I didn't say that." Cartwright tapped the papers. "I can't use these in court, but I can use them to justify sending a federal marshal to investigate. If the marshal finds independent evidence of wrongdoing, that will hold up." "How long will that take?" Cole asked. "Weeks, maybe months." "We don't have weeks." Cole stood, his chair scraping back. "Holt knows what we took. He's going to move against the ranchers now before anyone can stop him. If you wait, people will die." "I understand your frustration. You don't understand anything." Cole's voice was hard. "You're sitting here in your safe office with your law books while people out there are fighting just to keep what's theirs. Holt's hired killers are already on their way. By the time your marshal shows up, there won't be anyone left to protect." Cartwright's expression didn't change. "Nevertheless, those are the options I can give you. I'm sorry." Cole grabbed the satchel and headed for the door. Elena stood, not sure what to say. "For what it's worth," Cartwright said, "I believe you. I've heard rumors about Holt for years, but belief isn't evidence, not the kind I can use." Elena nodded and followed Cole out. They stood on the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun already sinking toward the horizon. Cole's hands were clenched into fists, the satchel hanging forgotten at his side. "We're running out of time," he said. "I know. If we ride back now, we might get there before Holt makes his move. And then what? We have 6 people who can fight, maybe 8 if Tom's up and Catherine can shoot. Holt has 20. The math doesn't work, Cole." "Then we make it work." Elena grabbed his arm. "Listen to me. You're right that we're running out of time, but charging back there to get slaughtered isn't going to save anyone. We need another plan." "What plan?" "I don't know yet." Elena looked out at the city, at the people moving through the streets like nothing was wrong. "But there has to be something." They found a boarding house near the edge of town and rented a room. It was small and plain, with 2 narrow beds and a window that looked out on an alley. Cole paced while Elena sat on one of the beds, thinking. "What if we went public with this?" she said finally. Cole stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "Cartwright can't use the documents in court, but that doesn't mean no one else can see them. There's a newspaper here in Denver. What if we gave them the story, showed them the contracts, the ledgers, let them publish it? And then what? Then everyone knows what Holt's doing. The banks, his investors, the people he's trying to intimidate. It's harder to operate in secret when everyone's watching." Cole considered this. "It might work, but it also paints a bigger target on our backs. Once that story runs, Holt will know exactly who to blame." "He already knows. We're already targets." Elena stood. "At least this way we're not alone." Cole nodded slowly. "All right, let's find the newspaper." The Denver Chronicle had offices on the main street, a 2-story building with ink-stained windows and the constant clatter of printing presses coming from inside. Cole and Elena walked in to find a young man hunched over a desk, scribbling notes. "We need to talk to whoever's in charge," Cole said. The young man looked up. "That'd be Mr. Foster. He's in the back. You got a story?" "We do." "What kind of story?" "The kind that ends careers." The young man's eyes lit up. "Wait here." He disappeared through a door. A moment later, an older man emerged, probably 50, with ink-stained fingers and a skeptical expression. "I'm Richard Foster, editor. You have something for me?" Cole set the satchel on the desk. Evidence of fraud, extortion, and murder. All committed by one man. Interested? Foster opened the satchel and pulled out the documents. His skepticism faded as he read, replaced by sharp focus. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" "It does if I'm going to publish a story calling someone a criminal." "Then don't call him a criminal," Elena said. "Just report the facts. Show people the contracts. Let them draw their own conclusions." Foster looked at her, then back at the papers. "This is Merrick Holt." "You know him?" "Everyone knows him. He's been buying up the Western Valley for 2 years. Some people call him a visionary. Others call him a vulture." Foster sat down, still reading. "If I publish this, he'll sue me into oblivion." "Not if it's true." "Truth is a defense, but it's an expensive one." Foster set down the papers. "I'd need corroboration. Other witnesses, independent verification. Otherwise, it's just your word against his, and he has more lawyers." "Then come with us," Cole said. "Come to the ranch. Talk to the people Holt's trying to force out. See the bullet holes in our walls. That's your corroboration." Foster hesitated. Elena could see him weighing the risks, the potential reward. A story like this could make his career, or destroy it. "How long would it take?" Foster asked. 3 days? 2 to get there, 1 to gather what you need. "And you'll guarantee my safety?" "I can't guarantee anything, but we'll do our best." Foster looked at the documents again. Then he nodded. "All right, I'll come. But I'm bringing a photographer." They left Denver at dawn the next morning. Foster had a horse, and he'd hired a photographer named Lewis, a quiet man in his 30s who carried his camera equipment like it was made of glass. The 4 of them rode west, the storm clouds still building on the horizon. Cole pushed the pace harder than Elena liked, but she understood why. Every hour they spent traveling was an hour Holt had to move against the ranch. By the second day, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of snow. "Storm's coming," Lewis said, looking at the sky. "We'll beat it," Cole said. They didn't. The snow started late that afternoon, light at first, then heavy. Within an hour, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The wind howled, driving the snow sideways, stinging Elena's face. The horses struggled through deepening drifts. "We need to stop," Foster shouted over the wind. "Find shelter." "We're almost there," Cole shouted back. "We'll freeze if we keep going." Cole looked at Elena. She knew what he was thinking. The ranch was maybe 2 hours away, but 2 hours in this storm could kill them. "There's a line shack about a mile north," she said, remembering something Tom had mentioned. "Ranchers use it during roundup. We can wait out the worst of it there." Cole nodded and changed direction. Finding the shack in the storm was harder than Elena expected. Everything looked the same. White snow, dark trees, wind that erased any sense of direction. But Cole's sense of the land was better than hers. After what felt like an eternity, a small structure appeared through the snow. The shack was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was shelter. They got the horses inside, crowding everyone into a space that wasn't meant for this many bodies. Elena's hands were numb, her face burning from the cold. Foster looked miserable, his lips blue. Lewis just started unpacking his camera, checking for damage. "How long will the storm last?" Foster asked, his teeth chattering. "Hard to say," Cole said. "Could be an hour. Could be all night." "We don't have all night. We also don't have a choice." They huddled together for warmth. Elena sat close to Cole, their shoulders touching. Outside, the wind screamed. The shack's walls groaned under the pressure. Snow found its way through cracks in the wood, dusting everything white. "Tell me about the ranch," Foster said after a while. "What's it like?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "It's home. Not fancy, but it's mine. I built most of it with my own hands. Started with nothing but a piece of land and a lot of stubbornness." "Why that valley?" "Water, good grazing. It's hard land, but if you work it right, it'll work for you." Cole's voice softened. "My father used to say land doesn't owe you anything. You have to earn it every day." "Sounds like a hard way to live." "It is, but it's honest." Elena listened, watching Cole's face in the dim light. She realized she knew almost nothing about him. where he came from, what his life had been before all this. He'd just been a dying man in the snow. Now he was something more, but she still didn't know what. "What about you?" Foster asked Elena. "How'd you end up out here?" "Long story." "We have time." Elena looked at the walls, at the snow piling up outside. Maybe they did. "I came west to help people. I was a nurse in Philadelphia, trained at one of the best hospitals. But I wanted to do more, wanted to go where I was needed. So I came to Colorado. And I learned that good intentions don't mean much when people decide they don't trust you." Elena's voice was flat. "I saved 17 people. But the one I couldn't save had a mother with money and a loud voice. After that, I couldn't save anyone." "So you gave up?" "I starved alone in a cabin waiting to die. I don't know if that's giving up or just accepting reality." "Seems like you're still here." "Seems that way." The storm finally broke just before midnight. The wind died and the snow thinned to flurries. Cole stood and looked out through a gap in the wall. "We can move," he said. They saddled the horses and set out into the night. The world was transformed, everything buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, the landscape unrecognizable. But Cole knew the way. He always seemed to know the way. They reached the ranch just after dawn. Elena saw the smoke from the chimney first, then the buildings appearing through the trees. Everything looked quiet. Too quiet. "Something's wrong," Cole said. They approached slowly, hands on weapons. But when they reached the yard, Grace came running out of the house. "Thank heaven you're back," she said, her face tight with worry. "Holt's men were here yesterday. They said if you don't surrender the documents and leave the valley within 3 days, they're coming back with everyone they have." "How many men?" Cole asked. 10. Maybe 12. They didn't attack, just delivered the message and left. Cole looked at Elena. 3 days. That's not enough time for a marshal to get here." "I know." Foster stepped forward. "But it's enough time for me to get a story out. If I ride back to Denver tonight, I can have something in print tomorrow. It won't stop Holt, but it'll make him think twice about open violence." "You do that?" Elena asked. "I didn't come all this way to turn back now." Foster looked at Cole. "But I need more than just documents. I need witnesses, people willing to go on record." "You'll have them," Cole said. "Catherine, Henry, Tom, if he's up for it. They'll talk." Foster nodded. "Then let's get started." They spent the rest of the day gathering testimonies. Foster interviewed everyone, Catherine talking about her dead husband and the threat she'd received, Henry describing how his cattle had been poisoned, Tom struggling to sit up in bed as he recounted the attack on the ranch. Lewis photographed everything, the bullet holes in the walls, the graves at the edge of the property, the scared faces of children who'd seen too much violence. Elena watched it all, feeling something shift inside her. These weren't just stories. They were lives. Real people who'd been hurt by a man who thought power meant he could take whatever he wanted. By evening, Foster had everything he needed. "I'll be back with the paper in 2 days," he said. "Maybe sooner." "Be careful," Cole said. "Holt might try to stop you." "Let him try." Foster mounted his horse. Lewis was already packed and ready. "You folks hold the line. I'll do my part." They rode off into the twilight. Elena stood on the porch, watching them disappear. "Think it'll work?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," Cole said. "We still have to be ready to fight." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. They reinforced barricades, stockpiled ammunition, brought in supplies from the surrounding area. Word spread to the other ranchers, and a few more families arrived, seeking safety in numbers. By the time the 3rd day dawned, they had 15 people who could fight and another 20 who couldn't but refused to leave. Elena spent her time organizing medical supplies and preparing for casualties she hoped wouldn't come. She set up a makeshift hospital in the barn, with clean bandages, boiled water, and all the tools she had left. Grace helped, moving with the kind of calm efficiency that came from years of frontier living. "You ready for this?" Grace asked. "No," Elena said honestly, "but I'll do it anyway." The sun climbed higher. Noon came and went. Elena stood in the yard watching the tree line, waiting for the moment everything would break apart. It came just after 2 in the afternoon. Riders appeared on the ridge, too many to count. They descended slowly, deliberately, like they had all the time in the world. At the front rode a man Elena had never seen but knew instantly. Merrick Holt. Merrick. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and expensive clothes. He sat his horse like a king surveying his domain. Cole walked out to meet him, stopping about 50 yards from the house. Elena followed without asking permission. Behind them, the ranch hands positioned themselves at the barricades, rifles ready. Holt pulled his horse to a stop. "Bennett, I hear you've been busy." "Could say the same about you. I gave you a choice. Surrender the documents, leave the valley. You chose to ignore me." "Those weren't choices. They were threats." "Call them what you want." Holt's eyes moved to Elena. "And who's this?" "Someone you don't need to worry about." "I worry about everything that happens in my valley." "It's not your valley," Cole said. "Never was. Never will be." Holt smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's where you're wrong. I own most of the land here. The rest is just a matter of time. I tried to make this easy for you, Bennett. Tried to buy you out fair and square, but you had to make it personal. You shot me and left me to die. That's pretty personal. Business. Nothing more." Holt leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over those documents you stole from my office. Then you and your people are going to pack up and leave. Anyone who stays gets hurt. Anyone who fights gets buried. Simple as that. And if we don't, then I burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." Elena felt her heart hammering. Around her, the ranch had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Cole's voice was steady. "You can try, but it won't be as easy as you think. You have what, 15 people? I have 30. The math isn't complicated. Math doesn't account for who's willing to die for what they believe in." Holt's smile faded. "Belief doesn't stop bullets. Neither does money." For a long moment, the two men just stared at each other. Then Holt straightened in his saddle. "Last chance, Bennett. Walk away." "No." Holt nodded once. Then he turned his horse and rode back toward his men. When he reached them, he raised his hand. Elena knew what was coming. She ran. The gunfire started before Elena reached the house. She heard the first crack, then a dozen more. Bullets tearing through the air around her. She dove behind the water trough, her shoulders screaming in protest. Cole was right behind her, his rifle already up, returning fire. The world exploded into noise and smoke. Holt's men charged forward on horseback, spreading out to surround the ranch. The defenders fired from behind barricades, from windows, from anywhere that offered cover. The sound was deafening. Rifles, pistols, men shouting, horses screaming. Elena crawled toward the barn where she'd set up the hospital. A bullet hit the ground inches from her hand, spraying dirt in her face. She didn't stop, just kept moving until she was through the door and inside. The wounded started coming almost immediately. A ranch hand named Miller shot through the leg. One of Henry's men with a bullet in his shoulder. Catherine herself, blood running from a gash across her forehead where debris had hit her. Elena worked without thinking, her hands moving through familiar motions. Tourniquet, pressure, bandage. Stop the bleeding first, deal with the rest later. Grace appeared beside her, helping hold patients down, passing supplies, never flinching even when blood sprayed across her apron. "How bad is it out there?" Elena asked as she stitched Miller's leg. "Bad," Grace said, "but we're holding." The fighting went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. The sound of gunfire began to slow, then stopped altogether. Elena looked up from the man she was treating, her hands shaking from adrenaline. Cole appeared in the doorway. He was covered in dirt and powder burns, but he was standing. "They're pulling back, regrouping." "How many did we lose?" Elena asked. "None dead, 6 wounded, including the ones here." He looked around the barn at the injured men. "You did good." "It's not over, is it?" "No, Holt's just testing us, seeing what we've got. He'll come again, harder this time." Cole was right. The second attack came an hour later, just as the sun started to set. This time Holt's men didn't charge straight in. They spread out, using the trees for cover, picking off anyone who showed themselves. It was slower, more methodical, more dangerous. Elena stayed in the barn, treating wounds as they came. But she could hear the change in the fighting. The way the gunfire became more sporadic, more deliberate. They were wearing down the defenders, forcing them to conserve ammunition, waiting for mistakes. Tom appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a crutch. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. "You should be in bed," Elena said. "So should half the people out there." Tom moved to the window and looked out. We can't keep this up. We're running low on ammunition, and Holt knows it. What do we do? Hope that newspaper man keeps his word. But hope wasn't a strategy, and Elena knew it. She looked at the wounded men in the barn, at Grace's exhausted face, at the blood staining the floor. They were losing. Not quickly, but steadily. Holt had more men, more bullets, more time. Eventually, the math would catch up with them. The third attack came at dawn the next morning. Elena had been awake all night, checking on patients, changing bandages, stealing a few minutes of sleep against the barn wall when she could. When the shooting started again, she was almost too tired to react. But she forced herself up and went back to work. This attack was different. Holt's men set fire to one of the outbuildings, sending thick black smoke across the yard. They used the smoke as cover, advancing closer to the main house. Elena could hear shouting, the sound of breaking glass. Someone screamed. Then, through the smoke and noise, she heard something else. Hoofbeats. A lot of them. Coming fast. The gunfire stuttered and stopped. Elena moved to the barn door and looked out. Through the smoke, she could see riders approaching from the east. Dozens of them. For a moment, her heart sank, thinking Holt had brought reinforcements. But these riders weren't attacking. They were forming a line between Holt's men and the ranch, rifles raised but not firing. At the front was Foster, the newspaper man. Beside him rode Judge Cartwright, and behind them were what looked like every rancher and homesteader within 100 miles. Maybe more. Holt's men pulled back, uncertain. Holt himself rode forward, his face twisted with fury. "What is this?" he shouted. Foster held up a rolled newspaper. "Justice, Mr. Holt. The Denver Chronicle published a full account of your activities yesterday. By now, every bank you've borrowed from has seen it, every investor you've swindled, every person you've threatened." He smiled. "You're finished. You can't prove anything. Actually, we can." Judge Cartwright rode forward. "I have a federal marshal on the way with warrants for your arrest. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. And thanks to the good people of this valley, I have enough witnesses to put you away for the rest of your life." Holt looked at his men. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing his options. Fight and die, or surrender and face trial. "Your men know the game's up," Cole said, walking out from behind the barricade. He looked like he'd been through hell, clothes torn, face blackened with powder, but he was standing tall. "They were in it for money. You don't have money anymore. They're not going to die for you." One by one, Holt's men lowered their weapons. Some dismounted and walked away without a word. Others just sat their horses, waiting to see what would happen. Holt stared at Cole with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Two of Cartwright's men rode forward and took Holt into custody. He didn't fight, just let them bind his hands and lead him away. As he passed Cole, he spat on the ground. Cole didn't react, just watched him go. The silence that followed was almost eerie. After 2 days of constant gunfire and fear, the sudden peace felt wrong, like Elena's ears were still waiting for the next shot. She walked out of the barn slowly, looking at the gathered crowd. There had to be 100 people there, maybe more. Ranchers she recognized, others she didn't, all of them standing together. Foster rode over to her and Cole. "Sorry we cut it close. Took longer than expected to get the word out." "How'd you convince them to come?" Elena asked. "I didn't have to. Once people saw the story, saw the evidence, they were ready to act." Holt had been using fear to control them. Once they realized they weren't alone, that others were willing to stand up, the fear lost its power. Elena looked at the faces around her. She saw Catherine holding her children, relief written across her features. Saw Henry shaking hands with ranchers he'd probably never met. Saw Grace standing on the porch, tears streaming down her face as Tom limped over to hold her. "We did it," Cole said quietly. "We actually did it." Elena wanted to feel the same relief she saw in everyone else, but all she felt was tired. Bone deep, exhausted, tired. She'd spent 2 days treating wounds, watching people fight for their lives, wondering if the next bullet would find her. Victory didn't erase that. It just meant they'd survived. The next few days were a blur of activity. The federal marshal arrived and started taking statements. More of Holt's men were arrested, including the ones who'd attacked the cabin and shot Tom. The evidence Elena and Cole had stolen was officially entered into the record, along with testimony from dozens of witnesses. Holt himself was taken to Denver to await trial. Elena heard later that the banks had already foreclosed on his properties, that his investors were suing him for fraud, that his whole empire had collapsed in less than a week. She felt nothing about it. No satisfaction, no anger, just the same exhaustion. She spent her days treating the wounded, helping families repair damaged buildings, trying to put the ranch back together. Cole worked beside her, never stopping, never complaining, but Elena could see the weight he carried. He'd come close to losing everything. Still might lose it, depending on what the banks decided to do with Holt's foreclosed properties. 2 weeks after the siege ended, Judge Cartwright returned to the valley. He gathered all the ranchers and homesteaders in the Bennett ranch house. They barely fit, packed shoulder to shoulder in the main room, and stood before them with a stack of papers. "I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing land titles and contracts," he said. "Merrick Holt acquired 23 properties through fraud, coercion, or outright theft. Those transfers are now void. The land reverts to its original owners, or in cases where the owner has died or moved away, to their heirs or next of kin." A murmur went through the crowd. Catherine gripped her children's hands so tight her knuckles went white. "Furthermore," Cartwright continued, "the territorial government has issued an injunction against any future attempts to consolidate land holdings through intimidation or violence. Anyone caught engaging in such activities will face immediate federal prosecution." Henry Oakes stood. "What about the water rights? Holt claimed he owned the whole river system. Those claims were fraudulent. Water rights belong to the ranchers who've been using them, as they always have. Any disputes can be settled through proper legal channels, not through hired guns." The room erupted in voices, people thanking Cartwright, thanking each other, crying, laughing. Elena slipped out onto the porch, needing air, needing space. She sat on the steps and looked out at the valley. The snow had melted, leaving the ground muddy and brown, but she could see green underneath, spring pushing through despite everything. Cole found her there a few minutes later. He sat beside her without speaking, just sharing the space. "You okay?" he asked finally. "I don't know. Are you?" "I don't know either." They sat in silence for a while. Inside, the celebration continued, people planning for the future now that they had one again. "What happens now?" Elena asked. Cole took a breath. "I rebuild, fix what got broken, try to make the ranch work again." He paused. "What about you?" Elena had been asking herself the same question for days. She couldn't go back to town. Even if people had forgotten her supposed crime, she'd never forget. She couldn't stay here either. This was Cole's home, his life. She was just someone who'd helped him survive. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've been running for so long, I'm not sure what it looks like to stop." "You could stay?" Elena looked at him. "Why?" "Because we need a doctor. The nearest one is 2 days' ride from here, and that's too far when someone's bleeding." Cole met her eyes. "Because you're good at what you do. Because people trust you now. Because this valley needs you. The valley needs me, or you need me?" Cole didn't answer right away. "Both." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. She'd spent so long believing she didn't belong anywhere that the world had decided she was worthless. But here was Cole, offering her a place. Not out of pity or obligation, but because she'd earned it. "I'll think about it," she said. "Take your time." But Elena didn't need time. She already knew her answer. She just needed to hear that someone wanted her to stay. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into new rhythms. The ranchers worked together to repair buildings and fences. Families who'd fled during the siege returned home. Catherine reopened her late husband's general store. Henry started planning for spring planting. Tom recovered enough to walk without a crutch, though Grace still hovered over him like he might collapse at any moment. And Elena started building a clinic. It wasn't much at first, just a room in the barn that Cole helped her clean out and stock with supplies. But word spread quickly. A farmer rode in with a broken arm. A woman came with her sick child. A young man who'd been injured in the fighting and needed his stitches removed. One by one, people started coming to Elena for help. She worked from dawn until dark, treating everything from infected wounds to difficult births to simple exhaustion. She taught Grace and Catherine basic nursing skills so they could help when things got busy. She sent letters to Denver requesting medical supplies and books, anything she could use to keep learning. The work was hard and the pay was mostly in trade. A chicken here, some flour there, occasionally actual money when someone had it. But Elena didn't care. She was doing what she was meant to do, helping people who needed her, building something that mattered. 6 months after the siege, Cole found her in the clinic late one evening. She was reorganizing supplies, making room for a shipment that was supposed to arrive the next day. "You're still up," he said. "So are you. Can't sleep. Too much on my mind." He leaned against the doorframe. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Elena set down the bottle she was holding. "All right. The ranch is doing well. Better than I expected. We had a good spring, and it looks like summer will be even better. I'm thinking about expanding, building a new barn, maybe a bunkhouse for hands I'll need to hire." He paused. "And I was thinking we should build you a real clinic, not just a room in a barn, but a proper building. Somewhere people can come and know they'll be taken care of." "Cole, that's too much." "It's not. You've treated half the valley over the past 6 months, saved lives that would have been lost. People are healthier, safer because of you. That's worth investing in." Elena didn't know what to say. The idea of a real clinic, a place that was hers, built for the work she did, it was more than she'd ever imagined. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Cole stepped closer. "Because you changed everything. Before you, I was just a man fighting to keep what was mine. But you taught me that survival isn't enough. That building something that lasts, something that helps other people, that's what matters." He reached out and took her hand. "You taught me that." Elena looked at their joined hands. His were calloused and scarred, marked by years of hard work. Hers were stained with medicine and blood, marked by the lives she'd tried to save. Different hands, different histories, but somehow they fit. "I'll help you build it," she said. "The clinic, if you're serious about this." "I'm serious." "Then okay." Cole smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him in months, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. Like the weight he'd been carrying had finally eased. Over the next year, the valley transformed. The clinic was built, a solid structure with 2 examination rooms, a surgery, and space for patients who needed to stay overnight. Elena hired a young woman named Sarah as an assistant, teaching her the basics of nursing. Together they treated everything from broken bones to childbirth complications to the simple ailments that came with frontier living. The other ranchers prospered too. With Holt gone, they started cooperating instead of competing. They shared resources, helped each other during harvest, traded labor and equipment. The valley became something more than just individual homesteads fighting to survive. It became a community. Judge Cartwright visited periodically, checking on the legal situation, making sure no one else tried to pull what Holt had done. He told Elena privately that Holt had been sentenced to 15 years in prison, that his entire operation had been dismantled, that he'd never be a threat again. Elena nodded, but found she didn't care much. Holt was the past. She was focused on the future. Cole proposed to her on a spring evening, sitting on the porch of the ranch house they now shared. There was no grand gesture, no elaborate plan, just Cole, turning to her as the sun set over the valley and saying, "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Elena had learned a lot about herself over the past 2 years. She'd learned she was stronger than she thought, more resilient, capable of surviving things that should have broken her. She'd learned that home wasn't a place you were born. It was something you built piece by piece with people who saw your value even when the world didn't. She'd learned that the difference between giving up and holding on was often just one person saying you mattered. So when Cole asked her to marry him, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "Yes." They married in the summer, surrounded by everyone they'd fought beside. Catherine and her children came, and Henry Oakes, and Tom and Grace, who cried through the whole ceremony. Foster came from Denver with a photographer who captured the moment. Ranchers from across the valley attended, people Elena had treated, people who'd stood with them against Holt. It wasn't a fancy wedding, just a simple ceremony in front of the new clinic, with words spoken that promised loyalty and partnership and love. Elena wore a dress Grace had helped her make, and Cole wore his best shirt, and when they kissed, everyone cheered. That night, lying in bed beside Cole, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia to Colorado, from hope to despair to something she'd never expected, a second chance, a real home. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked. "About how far we've come, both of us." "It's been a strange road." "The best ones usually are." Elena turned to face him. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" No. You? Elena thought about the Hamilton boy, about starving in that cabin, about killing a man and jumping from a window and cutting bullets out of people she barely knew. She thought about all the moments she'd been sure she wouldn't survive. And then she thought about the clinic full of supplies, about the patients she'd saved, about the community that had grown up around them, about this man beside her who'd seen her at her worst and still chose her. No, she said, I don't regret any of it. Over the next few years, the valley continued to grow. More families moved in, attracted by the stability and cooperation that had replaced Holt's regime of fear. A school was built, a church. A real town started forming around the general store and the clinic. Elena's practice expanded. She trained more assistants, brought in more supplies, started keeping detailed records of treatments and outcomes. She corresponded with doctors back east, sharing knowledge, learning new techniques. The clinic became known across the territory. People would travel for days to see her when their local options ran out. She delivered babies who grew into children who called her Aunt Elena. She set bones for men who'd once shot at her during the siege. She treated former enemies and new friends with the same care, because that was who she'd decided to be. Not someone defined by what had been done to her, but by what she chose to do for others. Cole's ranch prospered. He hired workers, built new structures, bred some of the best cattle in the valley. But he also spent time teaching other ranchers, sharing what he'd learned, helping new homesteaders get established. He and Elena became the center of the community in a way neither of them had planned. People came to them for advice, for help, for the simple reassurance that someone cared. 5 years after the siege, Judge Cartwright visited one last time. He was older now, ready to retire, but he'd wanted to see the valley one more time before he left the bench. I've seen a lot of places in my career, he told Elena and Cole over dinner. Most of them stay broken. The violence, the corruption, it leaves scars that never heal. But not here. You two built something different. We had help, Cole said. Everyone has help. Not everyone uses it wisely. Cartwright looked at Elena. You know what the difference was? You refused to let bitterness define you. Both of you. You'd both been hurt, betrayed, left for dead. You could have spent the rest of your lives angry, getting revenge, nursing wounds, but instead you built. You healed. You made something better. Elena thought about that conversation for a long time after Cartwright left. She realized he was right. She and Cole had both been given a choice: let the past destroy them or use it to build something new. They'd chosen to build. Not because it was easy, not because they were saints or heroes or anything special, just because the alternative, staying broken, staying angry, was a slower way of dying, and they'd already survived too much to die that way. 10 years after Elena first found Cole bleeding in the snow, she stood on the porch of their home and looked out at the valley. The clinic was bustling. Sarah was inside with 2 other assistants, handling a busy afternoon. The town had grown into a real settlement with shops and homes and a school where Catherine's youngest now taught. Children played in the street. Ranchers drove cattle toward market. Someone was building a new house on what used to be Holt's land. The property sold to a young family just starting out. Cole came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Busy day? 3 deliveries, 2 broken bones, and a very stubborn case of pneumonia that finally turned the corner. Elena leaned back against him. Busy day for you? Signed a contract to sell cattle to the army. Big order. Should keep us stable for the next few years. Us? I like the sound of that. Me too. They stood there together, watching the life they'd built go on without them. This was the thing Elena had learned, the lesson that had taken her years to understand. Survival wasn't about being strong enough to never break. It was about breaking and healing and breaking again and still choosing to get up. It was about finding people who'd stand beside you in the breaking, who'd help you heal, who'd remind you why fighting mattered. The valley had taught her that. Cole had taught her that. The people who'd stood with them against Holt, who'd refused to give in to fear, who'd chosen cooperation over competition, they'd all taught her that. Individual survival was hard and lonely and often impossible, but survival together, as a community, as people who cared for each other, that was different. That lasted. We should tell them, Cole said quietly. Elena's hand moved to her stomach. She'd found out 2 weeks ago, had been waiting for the right moment to share the news. You think they're ready for another Bennett in the world? Ready or not, here they come. Elena laughed. A baby. After everything, a baby, a new life starting in a place that had almost died. It felt right, like a promise that the future would be better than the past. That night they told Grace and Tom over dinner. Grace cried, of course. Tom just grinned and said it was about time. Word spread quickly. The whole valley seemed to know by the next morning. People stopped by the clinic to congratulate her, to share advice, to offer help. This was what home felt like, Elena realized. Not perfection, not the absence of struggle, but people who cared, who showed up, who built something together that was bigger than any one person could create alone. The baby was born in late winter, a healthy girl with Cole's gray eyes and Elena's stubborn determination. They named her Rose, after Elena's mother. Catherine and Grace helped with the delivery, and half the valley came by over the next week to meet her. Elena held her daughter and thought about all the lives that had led to this moment. The Hamilton boy who'd died despite everything she'd done. The mob that had driven her from town. The cabin where she'd nearly starved. Cole bleeding in the snow. The siege. The fear. The choice to keep going when giving up would have been easier. All of it. Every terrible, painful moment had brought her here. To this baby in her arms. This home she'd built. This man beside her. This community that had grown from ashes and fear into something worth protecting. She wouldn't change any of it. Years later, when Rose was old enough to understand, Elena would tell her daughter about those days, about the world that had tried to throw her away, and the choice she'd made to save a dying stranger. About how sometimes the smallest act of compassion, giving water to someone who should be your enemy, treating a wound that isn't your responsibility, refusing to let another person die alone, could change everything. She'd tell Rose about how her father had been more than just a man who'd been shot. He'd been someone who taught her that strength wasn't about never needing help. It was about accepting help when it came, and offering it when others needed it. About how building something that lasted required more than just individual courage. It required trust, cooperation, the willingness to stand with others even when it was dangerous. She'd tell her about the ranchers who'd stood together against Holt, about Grace who'd stayed calm when everything fell apart, about Tom who'd fought even when he could barely stand, about all the ordinary people who'd done extraordinary things simply because they refused to let fear win. And she'd tell Rose that the valley they lived in, this place of cooperation and community and second chances, hadn't always been that way, that it had been built by people who'd been broken and had chosen to heal, by people who'd had every reason to give up and had decided to keep going, because that was the real lesson. Not that good people always won, or that justice always prevailed, or that hard work guaranteed success. Those were nice stories, but they weren't true. The truth was simpler and harder. The truth was that survival, real survival, the kind that meant more than just breathing, required connection, required caring about people beyond yourself, required building something together that could withstand the storms that would inevitably come. The truth was that one person alone, no matter how strong or skilled or determined, could only do so much. But people together, standing for each other, refusing to abandon each other, even when it would be easier, that could change the world. Elena stood on her porch 15 years after that first winter, watching the sun set over the valley. Rose was inside doing homework. Cole was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal. The clinic had expanded again. They now had 3 full-time nurses and 2 doctors who'd come from back east, drawn by the reputation Elena had built. The valley was thriving, not perfect. There were still disputes, still hardships, still people who struggled. But there was also help. There was community. There was the understanding that no one had to face their problems alone. And that made all the difference. Elena heard footsteps behind her. Rose came out, 11 years old now, and already showing signs of her mother's stubbornness. "Mom, can you help me with my history homework?" "What's it about?" "We're supposed to write about someone who changed our town. I want to write about you." Elena felt her throat tighten. "Why me?" "Because everyone says you and Dad saved the valley. That before you, people were scared and alone. And after you, they weren't." "We didn't do it alone, sweetheart. A lot of people helped." "I know, but you started it. You made the choice that mattered." Rose looked at her with those serious gray eyes. "What was it like when you first came here?" Elena thought about the cabin, the hunger, the despair. The moment she'd found Cole in the snow and had to decide whether to help him or save herself. "It was hard," she said honestly, "harder than anything I'd ever faced. There were days I wanted to give up, Days I didn't think I'd survive. But you did. But I did. Elena pulled Rose close. You want to know the real secret? It wasn't that I was strong or brave or special. It was that I found people worth fighting for. Your father, Grace and Tom, Catherine and her kids, all the ranchers who stood together. I found people who saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself, and that made me want to keep going. Is that what I should write? Should. Write whatever feels true to you. But if you want my advice, write about how people need each other, how the strongest thing you can do is ask for help when you need it and offer it when someone else does. How community isn't just a nice idea, it's survival. Rose nodded, thinking. Then she went back inside to write. Cole came out of the barn a few minutes later and joined Elena on the porch. They stood together in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the valley settling in for the night. She wants to write about us for school, Elena said. What'd you tell her? The truth. That we didn't save this place alone. That it took everyone working together. Cole nodded. That is the truth. They stood in comfortable silence. Elena thought about all the years behind them, all the years still ahead. The clinic would keep growing. Rose would grow up and make her own choices. The valley would change and evolve and face new challenges. But the foundation they'd built, the understanding that people were stronger together than apart, that compassion wasn't weakness but wisdom, that home was something you created through daily choices to show up for each other, that would last. Because that was the thing about building something real. It didn't require perfection. It required commitment. It required people who'd stand beside you when things got hard and refuse to walk away. It required the belief that what you were building mattered more than what you'd lost. Elena had lost a lot. Her reputation, her certainty, her innocence about how the world worked. She'd lost the version of herself who thought good intentions were enough, who believed the world was fair, who didn't know what it felt like to kill someone. But she'd gained more. A home, a family, a purpose that went beyond just surviving. She'd gained the knowledge that she could break and heal and break again and still keep going. That strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up and helping others do the same. The first stars appeared overhead. Inside the house, Rose was writing her essay. In the barn, the mare was preparing to give birth to new life. In the valley below, lights flickered on in windows, families settling in, safe and warm, part of something bigger than themselves. Elena Ward had come to Colorado to save lives. She'd thought that meant being a nurse, treating patients, using her skills to help people. She'd learned it meant so much more than that. It meant building a place where people could be saved, not just from illness or injury, but from isolation and fear and the despair that came from facing the world alone. It meant creating something that would outlast her, that would keep healing people long after she was gone. That was the real work. Not the dramatic moments of crisis and survival, though those mattered, but the daily choice to show up, to care, to build. The unglamorous work of stitching together a community that could withstand whatever storms came next. Cole's hand found hers, their fingers intertwined, scarred and strong. You thinking about the past? He asked. About everything, past, present, future, all of it. Any regrets? Elena looked at the valley spread out before them, at the life they'd built together, at the home that had once been just a dying man in the snow and a woman with nothing left to lose. No, she said. No regrets. And she meant it, every word. Because sometimes the thing that looks like an ending is actually a beginning. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what you're really made of. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is the one that opens the door to something better. Elena had learned that the hard way, had lived it, survived it, carried the scars to prove it, and she'd do it all again if it meant ending up here, in this moment, with these people, building this life. That was her truth. Not the romantic version where everything worked out perfectly, but the real version where it was hard and messy and painful and worth it anyway, where survival wasn't a solo act but a chorus, where home wasn't a place but a choice you made every day, where the strongest thing you could be was part of something larger than yourself. The valley had taught her that. Cole had taught her that. And now, standing on this porch with the night settling in and her family safe inside and her work waiting for her tomorrow, Elena understood what it all meant. She was home,